Hi, we are here today representing our political party, the Reformist Party, and above all, the great leader of our party, Hugo Fernandez, that seeks your vote in the first free election that our country has ever seen in this great year of 1944 that will never be forgotten and remembered for the day that everyone had a voice, a say, and a choice in their future. Our party is a left-wing party that believes in the power of people and that the power must be shared between all people of Guatemala and not just a few families and companies that only represent 2% of our population. Our main purpose here today is to tell you our main ideas, laws, and reforms that will take place under the leadership of Hugo Fernandez, and above all, explain the reason why these reforms are so important for the future and prosperity of our great Guatemala. Our campaign and program can be characterized in three words that stand for what we believe and are the basis of: recognize, resolve, and reform. There's a lot to do, starting with the redistribution of land that has been in the hands of Iberian descendants and US companies and not in the hands of indigenous people, and that needs to change if we want to change Guatemala. There's also the necessity to look at our international allies and see if their interest is actually to help us or just to help themselves, especially with our relation with the US. Then we also need to increase our minimum wage to a value where people in it will stop living in poverty and horrible conditions. When it comes to developing our nation, industrialization is the only way for us to stop being a third world country and be sufficient on our own. One of our great desires is also to provide a good education for our population. And for that, we want to build new schools in every town and city to make it easier for children that come from poor backgrounds to be able to go to school. And while they're there, give them a free meal. That way, they are that way it will take some pressure from their families and it will make sure that the kids go to school. After this first part, we want to keep it doing for every single level of education.
Right. So there is no great secret that there is a sense of divide within our beautiful country. In fact, it appears to be a systemic issue that encompasses many of our brother nations across Latin America. The Reformist Party says that this ends now. We recognize the detriment that unequal distribution of land, lack of education, racial inequality, and unstable democracy has caused this country. What we desire, if not to win this election, then to at least make our voices heard as to the type of country that we feel we not only want to be, but deserve to be. Our place in the world is one of little influence. We don't speak of a thirst for dominance or power, but of a clear um, but of a clear need to be more self-sufficient in order to thrive. In our society, currently 70% of our land is owned by 2% of the population. Owners who appear to be, for the most part, European-descended elite, whereas the indigenous population of this country find their communities are being exploited on plantations, and without changes made towards educational reforms, the system remains against them, keeping one demographic in poverty and another able to hoard what little wealth this country has. Our relationship with the United States must also come into question. Despite being a separate country who gained liberation from the Viceroyalty of Spain in 1821, we find the US as somehow permitted to intervene in our public state of affairs, granting powers throughout Latin America to our militaries that they really have no right to. Although at times our allies, the US, have proved incredibly helpful, We believe that it is time for Guatemala to realize itself for itself. A huge proportion of our land is owned by the United States Fruit Company, land that we believe sits on Guatemalan soil and therefore should be given back to its people, who are in greater need of the opportunity of prosperity it will offer in comparison to one of the wealthiest countries on earth. We must also address our history and make active reconciliations in the name of fairness and brotherhood amongst all of our people. The colonization of this country means that there is a wide variety of differences and cultures. We are, in a sense, a blended people. We must acknowledge that the colonization of this country has prioritized the welfare of those among us descended from the Iberian Peninsula, and one of its consequences has been the erosion of languages and cultures of its native people, who are too often exploited and paid a ridiculously low minimum wage. Therefore, we want to reform in the means to redistribute the wealth of our country. We want a higher minimum wage, and we want a total reform of our educational system, with particular emphasis placed on areas with patterns of poverty. Some reforms include issuing a tax cap on the earning that sits in the 2%. A percentage of their earnings must be paid to the government to be reinvested in our new literacy schemes and educational renovations. We want to broker a redistribution of land deal with the United States Fruit Company. We want to set up community projects in consistently lower income areas. This aim is to reinvigorate and inspire the people of this country to greater ambition, all whilst actually providing them with the tools to do so. We want to elect representatives from each province who can bring forward the concerns and voice the wishes of the people. And we want to raise the minimum wage. If we wish to forge a new path, a path that will not only be successful. So if we wish to forge a new path, a path that will only be successful if each of us recognizes that no matter what brought us to our beloved country, and however we may appear to be different, we are the people of Guatemala, and there is a place for all of us here. People are starting to lash out and grow tired of these conditions, the instability and the inescapable struggle of poverty, the cycle that they have come to feel trapped in. And we aren't alone in our struggle. And that is why democracy is so important. We do not wish to inspire more revolution, because what does it achieve? The higher powers merely stage a coup and we are doomed back into our cycle of poverty and division. No, it stops now. We do not care for rebellion, violence, deaths, countrymen turning on each other. We care about making real steps to ensure real change for this country that is ours. If you vote for our party, you are voting for change. You are voting for community, and you are voting for a chance to no longer simply survive, but to thrive. They want you to rebel. We want our people to recognize, resolve, and reform.
For too long, now we have been under the thumb of American influences. It's time we start to take back control of our own economy, starting with exports and transport. For too long, United Fruit and its sister company, International Railways of Central America, have controlled our country's two most valuable resources of income, fruit and cross-border transport. For too long, these monopolies have not benefited us as a country, not as a society. What little income it does generate is not proportionally distributed between the Maya and Ladinos. To help combat the socio-economic divide that exists between the Maya and Ladinos, we've decided upon a policy which will help tackle two birds with one stone: land reform. By redistributing uncultivated land, we can help rid the Ladinos of unused land in exchange for bonds and government credit. Only 2% of our population controls 72% of the arable land, only 12% of which is under cultivation. We strongly believe that the best way to combat the neofeudalism our country is experiencing is through land reform. We have come up with a proposal that the existing Landowners Association General de Agricultores, AGA, will undoubtedly agree to. We're calling for 600,000 hectares of farmland to be redistributed to 100,000 families, specifically authorising the redistribution of all uncultivated land on estates larger than 670 acres, and of land on estates sized from 200 to 670 acres, on which less than 2/3 of the land is cultivated. We would like to establish a system by using bonds to compensate people who lose land to peasants. The property owners will be paid in bonds which mature in 25 years. The value of the land will be based on claims made this year's tax returns. We also want to specify we plan to redistribute all of the government-owned fincas nacionales, which contribute to a quarter of the nation's coffee production. The agrarian reform intends to eliminate the feudal property structure in the countryside and develop relations of production that originate to develop the land to the form of operational and capitalist methods of production in agriculture, and to prepare the way for the industrialization of Guatemala. This is intended to eliminate all feudal type property and especially targets work servitude and the remnants of slavery. This law also gives new landowners the opportunity of choosing lifetime tenure instead of private ownership, with the goal of preventing larger landowners from simply buying back the land. The challenges facing our developing country vary from poverty, ignorance, subhuman levels in food, healthcare, and social security. Such issues demand a need for industrialization as the main tool to overcome the vast gaps that exist between developed and developing countries. The main reasons for relying upon industrialization for development are as follows. Progress in industrialization implies education, training of industrial and administrative skills, and infrastructure system which will positively influence the population. Countries facing the problem increasing population and an excess of natural resources should depend on industrialization to absorb the disguised unemployment from agriculture to industry. Industrial technology, which could be easily digested from developed countries, is intensively advanced compared to the agriculture technology. There's a definitive need of technical and scientific development produced by developed countries, which would massively aid agricultural production, preventing crop surplus or deficiency, which in turn reduces unnecessary overworking or the risk of famine. Opting for a light form of industrialization, such as industries producing consumption goods, for example, spinning, weaving, or shoemaking, as well as food industries such as coffee, oil, soap, and production of food canning of Guatemalan maize, beans, and rice. Not to mention that light industries in early stages of development are compatible with market demand locally and in terms of export.
In the end, we hope that we were able to pass our message to you, and above all, that now you have all the information that you need to make a wise decision in who you want to vote, and never forget what needs to be done for our country. Recognize, resolve, and reform.